authority, boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We do it all with style and panache, and with boxing writer, author, CompuBox counter, historian, and then a good guy. He is Lee Groves. How you doing, Lee?
Doing well, Smitty. How about yourself?
Good stuff. And speaking of good stuff, can't wait to get to our very special guest. He is Jacob Stitch Duran, cut man, corner man, hand man extraordinaire. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of stuff to get to. We might have time. We might have time at the end for memories and moments, but we've got a lot of memories to talk about from this past weekend. Fire away.
We do. Last weekend's show staged at Las Vegas's Mandalay Bay was divided into two parts. The first of which was streamed free on YouTube, and the second that was streamed as part of one's subscription to DAZN. The main event of the YouTube portion saw 42-year-old Cecilia Brækhus capture the WBC secondary title at 154 with a 10-round unanimous decision against 37-year-old challenger Maricela Cornejo. She was a late sub for Emma Kozin, who couldn't get a visa to get into the country. Brækhus won because she was the effective aggressor. She landed the cleaner, harder punches. But the longer and leaner Cornejo acquitted herself pretty well, given the extremely short notice. But Brækhus was the clear winner. And then the two fights we previewed for the DAZN portion of the show turned out pretty much the way we predicted. First, Gabriela Fundora retained her IBF flyweight title for the second time with a shutout unanimous decision against Daniela Asenjo, who at 33 was older by 11 years. Fundora used her height and her reach to keep Asenjo on the back foot. And to me, she showed continued growth in that she's throwing her southpaw right hook with pretty good snap. And she seems to have found that balance between maintaining her preferred distance while also being aggressive. What are your thoughts on how Gabriela performed?
A lot of upside for the beautiful young lady who boxed beautifully. She, I don't think she'll grow too much. Hopefully not for her opponent's sake, but
only 22.
Really good boxing. There's things I'd like to see her get off the line a little bit when she goes straight. I mean, just subtleties and things, but boy, there was so much to like. And, she's such a, and we know her, such a great young lady, great family, the Fundoras.
Yeah.
But man, when she gets into fight mode, she's a beautiful beast in there. And I can't wait to see her continue to progress. She looked really good.
Yeah. And as for the main event, we both thought that it was going to be a barn burner, and that's exactly what we got, as Vergil Ortiz overcame knockdowns in rounds 1 and 8 to pound out a majority decision victory over Sergey Bohachuk and win Bohachuk's WBC secondary title at 154. Now, Ortiz's 21-fight knockout streak came to an end, and more than a few people thought that Bohachuk actually should have won the fight. Now, I didn't score the fight live because, frankly, I didn't think the fight was going to go the distance. You scored it, though. How did you see it?
Yeah, at a $113, had it a draw. Could have gone either way. It was so close. There were some of the rounds, like even the knockdown rounds, that weren't necessarily 10-8-esque rounds. They could have been 10-9 rounds. And, but it was so close. I think it was a great fight for the fans. Vergil might have taken the worst of it in terms of the beating,
Especially, definitely.
But what I did love about him, he adjusted. In the later rounds, he started to box, to use more movement, to, get confusion, create confusion with Bohachuk, and used his boxing skills more to set up his power. He tried to steal some rounds, which I thought he did steal some. So I really like the adjustments that he made late. To me, that's a fight that screams rematch. For those out there saying, well, he's not ready for Crawford. When the hell are you ready for Crawford? Who the hell is ready for Crawford? Bohachuk comported himself well. I did one of his fights a few years ago. He gets hit a lot, and he gets hit a lot, but he hits a lot, and he hits hard. Scored the 2 knockdowns. They weren't devastating knockdowns. They were more flash knockdowns. My thing is just that they should have a rematch.
Definitely so. The talk, though, is that, Turki Alashik was interviewed. He said that he would like to have Vergil Ortiz fight Crawford. And someone brought up the idea of having Israel Madrimov, who lost to Crawford, fight Bohachuk, who lost to Ortiz, and have that on the undercard of the show. I think that makes perfect sense.
It makes common sense, which means it usually doesn't happen in boxing, but maybe the Turk can make it happen.
No, that's true. And then we move on to what might have been the fight of the year with Ortiz and Bohachuk, to the knockout of the year. And it came from an unlikely source. That was Angelo Leo.
Yeah.
Angelo Leo. It was a beautifully delivered counter hook to the jaw of Luis Alberto Lopez in round 10. It was just so picturesque, well delivered, knocked him flat on his back. There were a few scary moments when he was on the canvas, but Lopez recovered.
You didn't call the knockout, but you called it. You did your tornado warning. You called it.
Yeah, the conditions were there for an upset for the reasons you can watch last week. They pretty much came true. Alberto Lopez Leo was more aggressive. He was more technically sound. Something seemed off on Lopez. Maybe all those road wins were
he's just totally fundamentally flawed, and I like the young man. I've gotten to know him a little bit. Just when you don't have those fundamentals, whether you're a Hall of Fame fighter like Hamed or a guy like Lopez who's really burst onto the scene, they catch up with you. And you nailed it. You spent so much time telling me leading up to the fight. I had the opportunity to sit with Leo one night for about 3 hours watching fights. And hopefully we can get a side-by-side of Joe Frazier's sweeping left hook next to his, because let me tell you something. Joe would look down and be proud, man. There is no voting. Any other knockout can be beside that, but that is the knockout of the year. You can't score a more profound upset. And to do it at home, to win a world title when you're not even considered a knockout artist against a knockout artist, knockout of the year. Congratulations, young man. And to you for calling the tornado accurately.
Yeah, well, there you go. And before we go to break, I do have one preview to make. And that the main event of Saturday's ESPN card from Quebec City pits Christian Mbilli, who's the WBC's #1 challenger at 168, against veteran Sergey Derevyanchenko, who was rated 7th by the WBC. Mbilli is 27-0 with 23 knockouts. He's a high-volume guy, and he has power. Derevyanchenko is 38 years old, and he has fought just about everybody. He's lost 5 times, but they've all been to top guys, meaning that if Mbilli is a top guy, he should be able to beat Derevyanchenko. I've seen him. I'm impressed by him. I think he's going to win.
All right. Well, you're on a roll, a tornado-like-esque roll. Speaking of roll, we're going to roll to commercial break. When we come back, Jacob Stitch Duran right after this.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back on In This Corner, the podcast. 130, boxing's biggest names, biggest stories, biggest fights, memories, and moments. Speaking of big names, this gentleman joining us now, hailing from Planeta, California, residing in Las Vegas for about nearly the last 30 years or so. Good friend of mine, cut man, corner man, hand man extraordinaire, Jacob Duran, but we all know him as Stitch. And there he is And he's got his I don't know if you got that Hall of Fame ring on your Nevada Boxing Hall
No,
of
not
Fame.
yet. No.
You were just inducted in there the other night. First off, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on. How you doing, Ted? Last time I saw him was a trip to Germany.
Trip to Germany, yes.
So
yeah.
I want to talk since you haven't been on with us, let's go back like I do with all my guests and give us, if you can, the short version of you growing up, migrant workers working with their hands. It's so ironic that you end up working with your hands and becoming one of the best hand guys in all of pugilism. Take us through your childhood and on into how you got into boxing.
Yeah, I like that. The hands with the hands. I've never used that before, but I'm going to. I use my hands as a farm worker now. I'm using my hands as a cut man. But yeah, I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley. I was born and raised in a migrant camp. My address on my birth certificate is CPC number 12, California Packing Company. And then we lived at Hadley's camp. So farm worker all my life. And I joined the military in 1972 in the Air Force. And 74, they sent me to Thailand. And I always had dreams of studying the martial arts if I went to the Orient. That was during the Bruce Lee era, right? And saw my first Muay Thai fight. And that whole year, I dedicated my life to it and got back to the States and was at King's Gym in Oakland where Andre Ward trained. Got into boxing just to improve my hands and opened up a school of kickboxing. And then from there, I learned to be a cut man and made the move to Vegas 29 years ago, Smitty, to follow my dreams. And here I am.
You know, we were chatting before we started recording. I remember when my kids, of course, Megan, my daughter, who's now an actress, when I would be going to pick up or drop off Meg Puff, I call her, then I would see you, and we were just breaking into this sport and trying to figure out exactly what we wanted to do. And the interesting thing in tie-in, and I was talking to somebody else about this the other day, that you and I have a lot of similarities in that we're in the same sport, but it wasn't easy for either one of us. We both had to carve out our own niche. And by doing that, we sort of had at times recreated ourselves, and we figured out how to be in a sport, but to be independent and to let our skill sets but it hasn't always been easy, has it?
No, but you explained it right to the T, and we followed the same route. That's why I always tell people that line we're scared to cross. If you don't cross it, you'll never get there. And we've been there many times. But you're right, you had to create your own self coming in here. When I got here, I had a lot of experience in kickboxing. My first big fight was Raul Marquez when he fought Keith Mullins, when De La Hoya fought Camacho. Raul ended up with 5 cuts, something like 70 stitches. I kept him in the game, and Chuck Bodak's the first one that came up to me and says, "Hey man, good job." That was my coming out fight. And then of course the UFC brought me on, and that changed my character. And then the movies, the Creed movies, and that's just been a fun ride since then. But you're right, Smitty. It was a sacrifice not only for you and I to get recognized, but even for the families. We missed out a lot with families, and well, you know what it's like. And when I did my speech for the Hall of Fame, I mentioned that as everybody suffered to get where we're at.
Yeah, you mentioned Chuck Bodak, and I start to smile. Man, I had a great breakfast that would turn into lunch talking to him, along with Eddie Aliano and others. Were those the guys? Who were the guys that really inspired you, and did any of those guys actually teach you and give you tips?
Wow, that's a good question. But in those days, nobody would teach. But Eddie Aliano's, the Chuck Bodaks, Percy Richardson was really the first guy I looked at. But I remember Bone Crusher Smith was fighting Marvis Frazier in Richmond, California, and I had my school kickboxing that time. I was making the transition from a trainer to a cut man. So this guy did a good job, and I went and asked him. I said, "Hey, you did a good job. I'm trying to learn to be a cut man. Can you tell me what you did?" And he says, "F you, I'm taking this to my grave, and you got to learn like me." He walked away. I'm sure you had that experience, Smitty.
Oh, yeah.
So from there, now my job is to teach based on what this idiot tried to do. But that was the boxing mentality at those days.
Yeah, one of the things, folks, about Stitch that everybody in the sport will tell you, from the heavyweight champions of the worlds, because he's worked with a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
them, to actors, like Michael B. Jordan and Stallone, and the most important of the fans, that you don't ever see Stitch walking away from somebody that wants an autograph or wants a picture. He's never forgotten who he is and where he comes from. And you also, I know, because I've known and recommended you to so many people, you also will do seminars too and teach people, right? Are you still doing that?
I love doing seminars. The last one I did was in Mexico City with like 120 people. But I'm so busy now, Smitty. But what I did, I'm glad you asked, us. I think last month we just released, because I love teaching. That my whole goal when I retire is to be known as the guy that made this game safer. So there's so many mistakes being done in boxing, in combat sports, cutmen, trainers. None of us have to be certified to be called pros. None of us. So we do it at the expense of the fighters. So anyway, StitchDuran.com. I just put out a video called Giving the Fighter One More Round, and it'll show you how to wrap hands for boxing, how to wrap hands for MMA, how to work on swelling, the medications we use, what are everything from A to Z. What I do in a seminar, I did in a video. It's only $50, and it's not to make money. It's for you to learn how to take care of your fighter. And if you want to rent just wrapping hands, it's $10.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's not to make money, but it's to teach, and that's my legacy. And I make money otherwise. But
Yeah.
that's at StitchDuran.com.
StitchDuran.com. That's the same thing Lee and others are trying to get me to do with the young broadcasters, teaching them, rather than to actually say a left hook by, and so same thing I want to do with the broadcasters. Now we're going to dig deep, and you know how to stitch them up when they're deep. So Lee?
Well, first of all, what's the story behind the name Stitch? Did somebody give it to you? What's the story?
Yeah, you don't give yourself nicknames, right? That's
right.
Honorable. When I had my school of kickboxing, one of the fighters that I worked with was Dennis Alexio. He was the heavyweight champion of the world in kickboxing. In the movie Kickboxer with Van Damme, he was the brother in the wheelchair. Great athlete. Well, his sparring partner, Dave Rooney, they both fought the same night in Vallejo, California, and I worked Dave's corner. He was Dennis's sparring partner. I was learning to make the transition as a cutman, and the only way you could learn then, Lee, is to look and observe. Nobody would tell you their secrets, right? Quote unquote.
Right.
Well, I saw guys get tape and they rip them and put little butterflies, and that's what I did to him. He says, "Oh, I don't have to go to the hospital." He had a cut. I don't have to go to the hospital. You save me some stitches, I can call you Stitch, and that's where that name came from. And last thing I heard about Dave Rooney is that he was a fisherman somewhere in Alaska. I don't even know if David knows how much he changed my life.
Boy, does anybody outside your family call you?
Hey, so I sent Smitty a trailer to my documentary that they're doing on me, and this is my third movie with Michael B. Jordan. And every day just 6 weeks at a time, I'm with him and I'm wrapping his hands. And finally, on the third one, I'm saying, Michael, I'm so proud of you and Tessa and Ryan Coogler and Steve Capo for what you guys are doing. He says, Stitch, we went from being actors to writers, producers, and directors. He says, I'm directing Creed 3 and you're with me as long as you want. So on this one, that was in Creed 2. In this third one, I said, I'm wrapping his hands. I said, Michael, do you know my real name? He said, Stitch. I said, no. Do you know my real name? He says, I don't. Hey, anybody know Stitch's real name? It's Jacob. Nah. And you'll see in that piece, no, you don't look like a Jacob, So yeah, the ones that call me Jacob, to your question there, are people that I've known from way back, like James Smitty here. If he called me Jacob, I know because he's before, people realized I was Stitch in Vegas.
And nobody calls me James Smith. It's all Smitty or something worse than that. Go on, Nick.
Yeah. What was it about cut work that caused you to gravitate toward it?
I think just the accomplishments, the one-on-one, there's nothing like it, Lee, is when you're there with these guys, you're basically taking care of them. I always say, they're modern day gladiators, but deep inside they're all babies, and my job is to take care of the baby. But that's what got me is, working with my fighters and knowing that I made a difference in their career, where their parents would come or the wife would come and thank me and, moments like that. But the moment you get with these guys, it's priceless. And Juan Manuel Marquez he has his podcast. He interviewed me and he asked me a question that's never been asked before. He says, "Has a fighter ever disrespected you?" And I said, "No." I said, but I understand why, because I come in under a different condition. My job is to take care of you. So why would you want to mess with me, right? So now a lot of love and affection for these guys.
Yeah. What traits separate the great cut men from just the good?
Knowledge and composure. I always like to mention this on interviews like this to educate, but I always ask, I'll tell these young fighters, I said, look, if you're looking for a cut man, number one, if you put the swab in his mouth or in his ear, get another cut man. No gloves, get another cut man. That's old. Ask him, the medication, the adrenaline chloride 1000 that we use, the one you put in the swab and you put on the cut, ask him what the mechanical fundamentals are of that. And if the guy says it's a coagulant, get another cut man. That's the wrong answer. The adrenaline chloride 1000 that we use on a cut, when you see me work on a cut, I'll squeeze it first, right? And what you do is you take the little blood that's left in these little vessels, you take them out. When you put the swab, it absorbs into the vessels, and it's a vessel constrictor. So, see, just taught you and the listeners, that's what we do. But a lot of guys in this industry, if you ask them next time you interview somebody, what does the adrenaline chloride do? 1000. And say, oh, it's a coagulant. All right, that sounds fine.
And cut men pretty much are limited to the same substances, right? It's just the way that you use them and apply them that separate, right?
Yeah, there's three in the United States, three basic medications that are authorized. Is adrenaline chloride 1000, but that's by prescription only, right? Well, they all are. The other one is Avitine, more like a cotton candy type of texture. That's a coagulant. And then you have the thrombin, that's a liquid form of a coagulant. But there's also a gauze pad called Quick Aid that's 100% natural, doesn't require a prescription. It's made out of a seaweed base and it dehydrates the blood. So I always tell a lot of the trainers, if you can't get these through prescription, definitely get the Quick Aid, because all you do is you put it on the cut and you leave it there for 45 seconds. It dehydrates the blood and it stops it from bleeding. And
in this corner, the podcast, chatting with cut man extraordinaire Jacob Stitch Duran. Keep going, Lee. Run through. You got some great questions. Keep going.
All right. Well, the single worst cut that I've seen, and I've been watching boxing for 50 years, was a fight that I actually worked for CompuBox. It was the Badu Jack cut on the forehead during his fight with Marcus Brown. That was in 2019. The cut opened up in round 7, yet the fight ended up going the distance. And speaking of stitches, the gash reportedly required 132 of them to close. I know you didn't work on the cut, but was that the worst cut that you've ever seen?
I've worked on cuts like that with Marvin Eastman. In fact, that cut right there, when you pop that big vein, I worked that with Forrest Griffith. I worked that with Vladimir Klitschko. And see, that's my concern. I worked with Badu Jack after that fight. And my concern was the corner did a horrible job. In that type of situation, there was an unintentional headbutt, right? And they were both fighting for the number one position of rank number one. I would have called it a no contest. Number one, he wasn't going to win. I felt so sorry for Badu. He had blood, just his whole face was red. And he's going like this, cleaning the blood out. The corner should have stopped it, let it go to the scorecards. And either way, you could have renegotiated for a rematch because it was accidental and such a bad cut. Vladimir Klitschko, when I worked his first fight, in fact, Lamont Brewster got nominated also in the Hall of Fame. I told him that he changed my life because he beat Vladimir. And then Vladimir's first comeback fight was against Vergil Williamson, and I worked with him then. Well, he got that one cut. And I always look at rounds, try to score them as I go. And I know he won the first 3 rounds, and on the 4th round, he gets dropped. Nothing serious, but he got dropped. So he looked okay, but not great. The 5th round, he gets that unintentional headbutt. And Jay Nady will tell you, because he was a referee, Dr. Goodman and Jay come up to me during the corner. Well, I tell Vladimir Vitelli, I whisper to him, Emmanuel's on this side. I said, look, you got a back cut. You're winning the fight. I'm going to have the doctor stop the fight. That was my plan. So when the doctor came, she says, what do you think, Stitch? I opened up the cut. stopped the fight, went to the scorecards. He ended up being world champion for 8 years. So, you have to understand the game outside of just putting Vaseline and, putting a swab in your mouth or ear.
It's amazing, too, that you could have that focus. You talk about scoring a damn round, scoring the round so you're, up on that, knowing where the scorecard's in, and then to be able to think in the eye of the storm like that within a minute, and that's really good stuff. Then that shows how much focus you have, Go ahead.
Well, then that's through the experience factor also, because I've worked on those cuts before, right? And
yeah, but a lot of guys can be in there, but they can't perform under that type of pressure,
Yes.
So it's props to you.
Well, and that's why number one, you asked Lee about the what you need. Number one thing is composure. First and foremost, how many guys you see hands are shaking and they're doing all this.
And not only that, if you're calm, they're calm.
Yes. Yeah, but I remember Andre Ward when he got cut. Can't remember with I think my Edison Miranda somebody, but he said, "Oh man, I know I got cut." He goes, "Ah, but I got stitch in my corner." So you take that away from him. So,
yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the Vladimir Klitschko Deverell Williamson fight that took place in 2004. I saw a video in which you were discussing that particular fight, and you said that the next day Margaret Goodman came up to you and said what?
Dr. Goodman called me and she said, "Stitch, I just finished talking to the specialist that sewed him up. And he says it was a good thing that you stopped the fight when you did, because it was close to an optical nerve and it would have created double vision." Right. So she said she called Emmanuel Stewart and me and let him know that this is what Stitch did. There's a message that when I was doing the Creed movie, I gotta let you guys hear this. Jose Sula or Michael B. Jordan always asked me for the authenticities. Who should give away the WBC belt? That was a question. And I told him the Maurice Suleiman story and the father and all that. And so anyway, I see Mauricio when Earl Spence fought Ugas in Dallas, Texas. And I told him about that time. And both Vladimir and Vitaly were WBC champions. So he said, "Well, let's take a picture. Let's send it to these guys," right? And he did. And let me see if I can find this. Vladimir sent me a message, bro, that almost kind of made me cry. And, it was so special, just, what I meant to them. And oh, here we go. Let me see. I hope if you guys can't hear it, I'll tell you basically what it's going to do. But let me know if you can hear it.
Okay.
Specialist Stitch, with whom I spent so much time talking, and he actually saved my career on a lot of different stages. If Stitch wouldn't be in my corner, I would not make the record of 12 years being a champion. So that's so great to see you both, and Stitch is the man.
I told you, man.
That's I call him the most common and uncommon of all athletes, and to get a message like that from somebody like that, that's big stuff.
It's right. Hey, man, I got to tell you one more, because I love these guys. So when Vladimir fought Anthony Joshua, it's his last fight when he lost his title. My daughter Carla got married Wednesday in Crete. So Thursday night, I flew to London, and I saw him at the weigh-ins, him and Vitaly. And I'm talking to him, and finally at the end, I know they can't sleep at night. Psychology is a big thing, Lee. I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "Look, man, don't worry about nothing tomorrow. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son." And I leave. Boom. I'm putting the final Vaseline on him, man, the day of the fight. All these 90,000 crazy Brits. And Michael Buffer's ready to do the announcements, and we're this far apart. And he says, "You could call me son." Oh, man. That didn't get me, right? It gave me chills. And the last time I saw him in person was like 3 months ago, or 3 months after in Germany. And I said, "Vladimir, that one moment, why?" He says, "Stitch," he goes, "there's very few people I trust in my life. You are one of them." Wow. It's kind of stories I got, Lee. Yeah.
That's
crazy.
Tremendous.
Yeah, and you had the same kind of rapport with the athletes, the MMA athletes in UFC. Everybody knows not everybody knows the story. I'm just going to lay out and let you talk about you became the cut guy with UFC. Obviously, we know what happened. It had to do with sponsorship and Dana White's attitude. What do you want to say about those years with UFC, what happened, and how you feel about it now?
Oh yeah, no, it's the UFC kind of made me also. It gave me that exposure of, as a cut man, it gave me that exposure. That here's now I'm not only do I have boxing, but I knew Dana before the UFC, and he's the one that brought me in. And Bob Sapp was fighting Chemo in K1 at the Bellagio, and he's in the audience, and he asked for my card and called me and said, "We bought the UFC. Would you like to be one of the cut men?" Along with Leon Tabbs, was the original cut man from UFC 1. So we put this program together, you guys. And anyway, I was with him for 15 years. I was working on sponsors. Fighters were making a whole bunch of money on sponsors. We all know the story, right? So they go into Reebok and they don't notify the fighters at all. Go into Reebok and they go exclusive contract with them. And all these fighters have to lose their sponsors. So everybody is effing UFC, effing Reebok and Dana and this and that. And they call me, John Nash, never spoke to him before in my life. He called me and asked if I'd be interested in doing an interview of how the Reebok deal affected the cut men. And I thought about it because they were paying nothing. They were paying garbage for cut men, right? But it was a great opportunity. So I said, well, my parents were fighting for the rights for farm workers. I got to support them. So I did. The interview went viral. And right here where I'm sitting at, one of my friends said, we were all friends. They called me and says, "Hey, look, man, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more." And all right, well,
Did Dana call you directly?
No. And Dana, in one of the videos that he has, well, I'll tell you that story. He was one of my good friends. You know him. We all know him, but I never mentioned his name. But he called and his voice is crackling. And he says, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. I said, all right. I said, well, do me a favor. You tell Dana, I said, he ain't got no balls, that he should have called me personally since he's the one that brought me in, right? Anyway, the first message, and I'm getting tons of messages, support from all over. First message I read, I send back to the guy, I want you to let you know, UFC let me go for speaking out about the Reebok deal. Gotta find a new job. Man, Lee, I did 57 interviews in a week. That shit blew up. Wow. It blew up all over the world. And I had Univision coming, I had 3 camera crews that came, and the rest were interviews. And till now, people support me all the way, and always giving back. But that's my whole legacy, Smitty, is to help these fighters and change this game and make it better. It's horrible how, about 23, 24 years ago, I put some interviews together called Boxer's Nightmare, and it dealt with all the shit.
I remember that.
Yes, but you know what? Now, the young kid that helped me passed away about a year ago. I never did nothing with it. I saw it, and it gave me chills because everybody I have are all Hall of Famers. Half of them are dead now, but we talked about all the ills of boxing, and they had solutions. And so what I want to do now to support John and as a thing is to get some current interviews, because now everything that happened in boxing then, with dementia, with contracts, with everything, is now happening to MMA and boxing. Nothing's ever changed.
There are no coincidences, my friend. No. What happens is meant to happen. When it comes, a couple of quick things on cuts, whether it be a cut over the eyebrow, eyelid, forehead. What is the most difficult cut to stop the bleeding? I mean, even sometimes on the forehead, does it depend on the veins? What determines that?
Yeah, it's the size of the veins. And this one, that's what I was talking about. That's a real big one. The one Tim Tszyu got cut, that was a big vein. So what happens, like I say, adrenaline is a vessel constrictor. So it closes up the blood vessels. But when the vein is bigger than the ones here, then you have more blood flow. So you're not going to be able to stop it. And then when you put the adrenaline, it's not going to absorb into the tissue because the blood is flushing it out. And so those are the ones you got to make decisions on. The same thing with Tim Tszyu. They lost his world title fight because of bad corner work. This is the worst one. The ones, up here, when a referee or doctor stops a fight, it's because the fighter is at a disadvantage, and that's getting blood in his eyes or, swollen eyes you can't see, those type of things.
I had a friend that I told I was having you on the phone. This particular person doesn't know boxing that well, but said to ask Stitch about the Mickey line or the Rocky and Mickey. Cut it. Cut me. What did he say, Lee? Cut me, Mick. Have you ever? Has that ever happened in the history of boxing?
No, but it's funny because I did the Creed movies with Stallone, right?
Yeah.
And I've done like 4 movies with it, 3 movies. But I said, Sly, you know how many times I had to dispel your myth of cut me, Mick? It's good for Hollywood, but it's not good in reality because number one, the eye was closed. So that's a disadvantage. They should have stopped it at that point, right? Number 2, if you're cutting it, you're a surgeon you're not a surgeon, but you're doing surgical work in an area that's filthy. Now that's another problem. But then third, whatever little gash you could see out of, that blood's going to fill it up. So that's a no negative. On the Creed movie, when I did the fingers with Michael B. Jordan, how many fingers you see, that never happens either. But Ryan Coogler brought that up at the last moment. What do you think? I said, let's do it. Okay, how many fingers you see? Okay.
Yeah. Well, as the Colonel would say, never let accuracy get in the way of a great broadcast. I used to spend a lot of time with Rafael Garcia. I miss him.
Yes.
Great with doing hands. That's something you're also great at. You're known for Stitch, but you also do great work with the fighters' hands. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I've probably wrapped more hands than anybody in this industry, man. Just thousands and thousands of wraps, and it's all security, but it's I have a little scar right. You can't really see it a lot. I'd be home wrapping my own hands. I'd get on the bag and make adjustments, and so I'm at home and I'm cutting my wraps off, and I'm home by myself, and my skin turns, and I cut a hole about this big, and I start freaking out. Well, shit, I'm a cut man. So I went to the refrigerator, got the adrenaline chloride, put it on there. So this is a sign from God that I'm supposed to wrap hands. But yeah, I got a good wrap.
Does it depend on the fighter's hands? If there's a guy with brittle hands, will you wrap the hands differently?
There's that basic good question. There's that basic foundation, right? And like injuries, number one injury is going to be the metacarpal. See that broken bone right there?
Yeah.
Physically, when you punch, when you do this, right? So you try to what it's like.
Oh yeah.
You must have one.
No, I've got it. Yes.
Yeah. So you can tell by the way you laugh. So you try to lock in the metacarpals. The knuckles, believe it or not, are the last of the injury prone, the thumb and the wrist. And but yeah, you kind of add the pressures where Andre Ward, I can't remember who he was fighting, but we got into town. Virgil Hunter says he kind of hurt his hand in sparring. So I go in there and this, a couple of days before the fight, and I go through a wrap session and make minor adjustments. And he was happy with that, but it was more up here.
Lee, you got a couple of final questions?
I do. You and Mike Basel were the 2 cut men assigned to work Top Rank's cards that were staged inside the bubble at the MGM Grand during the COVID lockdowns. How did you react when the request came, and explain the challenges you faced during that time? Because there's a lot of work for you.
It was great now, but you know what? That program and what happens, Benny, I don't know if you guys or your listeners are aware, when COVID kicked in, nobody was doing nothing. Brad Jacobs called me and says that they were going to do 16 fights in the bubble, 2 fights a week at the MGM. And being that the fighter could only bring 2 coaches, they asked if me and Mike Basil would be the house cutmen, right? And sure, I live 20 minutes from the MGM, ESPN fights, why not? So yeah, we took the assignment. But for me, it's second nature because I tell you, when I was with the UFC, Burt Watson, myself, and Leo Tabs put that program together where we go wrap the fighters' hands and we work their corners. So for me to work 4 or 5 fights a night is common. All right, well, that program worked so good that when COVID finished, Top Rank, I don't even know if you're aware of it now, Lee, Top Rank called us, and Mike Basil and myself are still the house cutmen. It makes so much sense because economically, you don't have to fly in all these cutmen, hotel room, per diem, all that. But more importantly is a lot of these guys don't have cutmen, so now they have cutmen that we could wrap their hands or work their corners, and it's a safety factor that you gotta applaud Top Rank for seeing that, taking care of their fighters. I think so it's great. I love it. I was supposed to have been in Albuquerque, but I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. We always have alternates, guys that I've worked with before that have experience in MMA and boxing, because of cuts and wrapping hands? It was a good question.
Yeah. And you know, you mentioned the movie career where you were in the Creed, you were in the three Rocky films, you were in the three Creed films.
Here Comes the Boom.
Here Comes the Boom as well. Did you ever think that your fame would reach a point?
He was in Miami Vice. They thought it was Edward James Olmos, but it was actually Stitch.
Yeah, right. I get that Edward James almost all the time. No, you know what? I've been in 7 movies. When I left R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, I was with him for 23 years. I got a job transfer here. The day that I left, I got a call to do an audition for Play to the Bone with Woody Harrelson and Antonio Banderas. And that's the only time I ever auditioned. I went and got my Coleman jacket, and I don't even know what the hell I did, but I got the assignment. And then I did Ocean's 11 when Vladimir fought Lennox Lewis. It was
right.
4 days. But then that's when I worked with Vladimir. And when he told Emmanuel that he wanted the guy that was his cut man in the movie to work with him, Emmanuel came by and said, "Hey, man, I want to talk to you about Vladimir." So I did that. And then I did Balboa when Rocky fought his last fight. I was a cut man for Antonio Tarver. And I did one with Kevin James, Salma Hayek, MMA movie, and then Creed 1, 2, and 3. And I just got 2 Creed checks right now, residuals. I swear to God.
I don't even get residuals for my own damn TV show that's on the air. I must be doing something. I must be doing something wrong. But you've done a whole hell of a lot right. You got a long ways to go. I don't know. You've teased some of the things. What are your goals the rest of the way?
I'm working on a lot of projects. You know, I'm working with a product for the healing process of cuts that we used it with bare knuckle fighters and boxers, but it's called the Cut Cream. I put my name on it, Stitch Premium, and we're working on now on distribution on that. You've already had that. I got called for a cannabis line, Thai Stitch. I'm talking to people about that, and Dr. Persky, Adam Persky. I don't know if you know him. We just
are you kidding me? He was my. We were on the phone about some dental stuff the other day. Yes, he's worked on my mouth and my daughter's.
Yeah, so he's talking about working together with mouthpieces, safety factors, right? And then, like say, this documentary from the fields to the garden. We're just doing the final editing, and hopefully in three months we'll be up.
Yeah, I saw the teaser, man. It's gonna be scintillating. I think, and Lee, I think that. We might someday in the very near future hopefully see Stitch maybe in another Hall of Fame that you and I know pretty well.
Yeah, that would be the International Boxing Hall of Fame in Canastota. And if anybody deserves to be in it, it's cool. Stitch Duran.
Yeah.
I'm honored. No, it's, these, like I say, those are plateaus I never experienced or never existed in my mentality, just doing what I was doing. I was happy. But at the end of the day, man, I want people to, if I leave my legacy, is that I make this game a lot safer for the fighters.
Yeah, and you've done a great job with that. I'm again personally very proud of you because we both have taken this journey and we've stuck with it through ebbs and flows and highs and lows. We've been able to get to where we at. You certainly deserve everything you're receiving now. Always great to see you. Whenever I see you, I just get a smile on my face and we embrace, and we're usually having to go in our different directions with what we do. But at the end of the day, we both always give it our all, as does Lee Groves. Jacob Stitch Duran, thanks for joining us, my friend.
Thank you, Smitty. Thank you, Lee. We'll see you on the plane somewhere, huh?
And we'll see you with we're going to take a little quick break. We're going to come back and do some memories and moments, some history right after this.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back, final segment in this corner, the podcast, 1:30 Lee, you're going to take us. I mean, you're a historian. Nobody does it better than you. You're going way back.
Yeah, way back indeed. On this day, August 16th, 1743, 281 years ago, Broughton introduced the first rules of boxing. Now, Broughton was a protege of James Figg, regarded as the inventor of boxing as we know it today. And Broughton reigned as the English champion from 1729 until 1750. So he was the champion. He was an active fighter when he did this. He was prompted to write these rules after one of his opponents, George Stephenson, died of his injuries following their match in February 1741. Broughton was the first to popularize the use of gloves, though they would not become standard until the 19th century. And rule number 7 contains 2 concepts that are still in use today. 1, don't hit an opponent while he is down. And 2, no hitting below the belt. Before that, it was pretty much free reign.
Anything goes.
Yeah. And as for the other rules, they're quite different. First, a round ended only when a fighter was knocked down by a punch or thrown to the ground with a wrestling maneuver, which meant that a round could last only a few seconds or it could go an hour or more. So there's no set time limit. The rest periods between those rounds was only 30 seconds. We have a minute these days. And at the beginning of every round, the 2 fighters would have to stand inside a 3-foot square that is measured out inside the ring. And they had to prove that they were ready to fight before the round could be officially started. And also, there wasn't a set number of rounds to fight. Every fight was a fight to the finish.
So there were no championship rounds.
There were no
They were
championship
all
rounds.
championship rounds.
Definitely so. And Broughton's rules were replaced in 1838 by the London prize ring rules. And then those rules were replaced by the Marquis of Queensberry rules in 1867. And that pretty much set the foundation for what we have today. Now, here's a little bit of trivia for you, which should illustrate how far boxing has come in terms of safety. The longest gloved boxing match on record was achieved under the London prize ring rules. In April 1893, Andy Bowen and Jack Burke fought 110 3-minute rounds. The fight started at 9 p.m. It ended at 4:19 in the morning.
So very
7
similar
hours,
to
19
last week's card with Crawford's card. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it certainly seems so. That's 7 hours and 19 minutes. Now, most of the crowd left it by midnight, and some who ended up staying, fell asleep in their seats. That's how long the fight was going. Burke was nearly knocked out in the 25th round, and he ended the fight with 2 broken hands. And the 2 men were so exhausted by the 108th round that neither man was able to throw a punch. So in round 110, referee John Duffy called the match a draw and suggested that the 2 men split the purse. The purse was $2,500. So you talk about guys who earn their money. Those 2 guys certainly did it. And as violent as boxing can be today, it was much more so back in Broughton's day. And in response to that, he laid the foundation for at least some sanity in this often insane sport.
Wow.
There you go.
That's why he is one of the best historians in the business. I call him Young Hank. And for those of you who don't know what that means, that is in honor of my dear friend, Hank Kaplan, who's actually also, when I met Hank, he was still promoting boxing, and he actually found guys. To show you how great Hank was, he actually found a few opponents I could beat, and that was very difficult back in the day. And but yeah, that's interesting stuff, and it was really interesting stuff with Jacob Stitch Duran. The next few weeks, we don't exactly know what's going to happen, but I can tell you that Holt McCallany will be a future guest, a very, very soon to be. We'll find out exactly when we're going to line that show up. And I'm working on Mercury Morris. I'm working on Mercury Morris and Paul Warfield to spice it up with, the NFL preseason's underway, and I want to have some tributes to a team I know a little bit about, the 1972 Miami Dolphins, and then we'll continue with the greatest names in boxing, and not just the fighters, like today with Stitch Duran. What some great stories there. And he really got, up close and personal about, because just imagine that you're in there, Lee, in a fight, whether it be a little club fight where the way he started, or with 90,000 people in Wembley, and you're working on the heavyweight champion of the world, and he's cut, and you've got less than a minute, and you got the other cornerman, you got the doctor, and you got the fighter. It sounds like
the crowd going crazy,
and you stay focused during all of that. So fans who think it's all about, ingredients, coagulants, and toothpicks and Q-tips or whatever, it's really about focus. I think what I took most out of that interview is just as important as the stuff you use is how you apply it.
Definitely so, and also the demeanor in the corner.
Yeah.
Like I said, Pitch, if he's calm, you're calm.
Yeah.
And if you're calm, your heart rate slows and the blood doesn't flow as fast. So it's a chain reaction that could go one way or the other. And it really begins with the cut man and how well he does his job. And nobody does his job better than Jacob Stitch Duran.
And we'll agree with that, and we'll close with that. In this corner, the podcast, 1:30. So long, everybody.